Welcome everyone. I'm Anna Fedas from the Stefan Batory Foundation, and I represent Active Citizens Fund National in Poland. I am very honored to have this meeting on advocacy and monitoring, and I'm honored, of course, to also host this meeting. And I'm pleased to introduce to you our wonderful experts. So we have today organizations, representatives from Romania and Norway. First speaker would be Cezara Grama from Romania, and then we have Guri Idsø from Norway and Olivia Vereha from Romania. So we have like two countries, three organizations, three different perspectives and experience. And all of this experience referred to advocacy and monitoring activities. And of course, there will be also time for you to ask questions and maybe share your experience or reflection or opinion on that. I'm pretty sure you have also a lot of thoughts and also experience on this field. So not to take more time, I will give the floor and actually screen, not floor, to the first speaker. So Cezara Grama, sorry if I mispronounced your name, by the way, and of course use our chat and if you also want to share the organization and country or city you are coming from, of course it will be also more familiar for us to see from which parts of Europe we have participants. Okay, so Cezara, screen is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here with you today. And thank you very much for your invitation. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible on the experience of the organization I'm representing today, which is Expert Forum in Romania. And I have prepared a short presentation that I'm going to go through as I speak. So my name is Cezara Grama. I work with Expert Forum in Romania. And we are a think tank which was founded in 2011 by 4 experts who had been working here for a pretty long time. We do work in Romania, but we also work in neighboring countries, especially in Eastern Europe and Western Balkans. I joined the team of Expert Forum in 2014. My area of expertise, let's say, would be justice, rule of law, and CSO sector. In the sense, more recently, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about this. I would say that our main priorities in what we do are the following: justice, anti-corruption, elections, administration reform, and public sector integrity, but also regional development, energy and transport, and civil society as a whole. Our activities are quite wide, as you would see, but today I've tried to organize a little bit our activities according to the topic of our discussion. So the part of advocacy and monitoring. And I would say that on the advocacy part, our most in recent years, what we've done is we've worked a lot on electoral reform, as well as justice reform, anti-money laundering legislation, and GDPR in the non-governmental sector. And I'm going to be telling you a little bit about this. And as well as Freedom of Information Act, which is something very important for all our countries and especially our sector. In terms of monitoring, elections is also something where we're very active. Political clientelism is also something that we do and we monitor, and we've been monitoring this for a while. And this year, actually, FOIA as well. And with no further ado, because as I said, I would like to keep this short so that we can have a discussion if there's questions or curiosities. I would go a little bit into our most recent activity when it comes to FOIA. I would start with the fact that, as everywhere into 2020, we went through a couple of months of lockdown here, March to May. This period, and in the constitutional context of Romania, this gave additional powers to impose restriction on the population to law enforcement in general. This meant that restrictions meant me as everywhere. People were not allowed to leave their houses after a certain hour, or here actually for 2 months during the day, you were not allowed to leave the house without having a declaration on you or a specific reason, like going to work or doing specific activities. What happened is that sanctions were quite rough, meaning that police were, or law enforcement, because we're not talking only about police, but also gendarmerie and actually defense also, were allowed to apply warnings, to give out warnings or fines up to 20,000 lei, Romanian lei, which is up to 5,000 euros. And the problem was that the law was not very clear. It didn't actually give you, for example, like a scale. If you did something, you could get 500 and then go up, depending on how bad what you were doing, how bad what you did was. The limit of the fine was actually decided arbitrarily by the police officer, which meant that up to 16th of April, there were a lot of information in the press that police were giving out very different kind of fines all over the country for things like you forgot to bring the piece of paper that said that you were going out for shopping, for example. And there were people who were being fined very high sums for this. As you can imagine, the way the law was framed was very vague, and this led actually the ombudsman to actually contest this at the Constitutional Court, which found it unconstitutional on the 16th of April. So what happened is that most of these fines, although they had in almost a month and a half, we had the police and the gendarmerie give out fines, and in high numbers and high value, they were left without a legal basis. So what we did, we requested the information from police and gendarmerie to find out how many sanctions they had applied. And we wanted to see exactly what the data said. Had they applied fines up to the maximum limit? Where would you be seeing problems? Was it rural areas, urban areas? What was the data telling us about how the police had handled these additional powers that they had? We requested it based on the Freedom of Information Act. The gendarmerie communicated this information, the police did not, at least not in total, only certain information, meaning that they could give us total number of sanctions, a total value of sanctions, but we didn't know out of all of these how many were fines. So you had, let's say, like a bucket of 10,000 sanctions, but you didn't know how many were fines and how many were warnings, for example. And they couldn't give us this information as well. They couldn't give us information on how many were applied in rural areas, in urban areas. So there was only very limited information. The reason for refusing to give us this information was that it wasn't that they didn't have it, because of course when you get fined, you get a piece of paper which says all of this information: how much, for what, where was it actually applied. The problem was that the police did not collect this data, and they justified that if they don't do statistics on this data, then they don't have to give us the information. So because the law only makes it mandatory for the public institution to give you the data that they have, not to process information for your request. Of course, this is not true. Although we've had this law, like many countries, we have had a Freedom of Information Act for 20 years this year. As we can see, we still have problems with the way that, with proper understanding of it, and especially with the application of it. Since 20 years from its entry into force, we still are debating whether a public institution has to process information in order to give you access to it. And of course, the bigger problem is in this scenario, and with most public institutions, is that especially during a time like this, when executive power is giving additional powers to impose sanctions, right, over the population, and to bring limitations to freedoms and rights. The problem is if they don't have the data to evaluate their policy during this time, then basically you have no possibility to actually evaluate whether what you did was good or not, and which are the challenging issues that you have faced during this period. which are the areas which didn't abide by these restrictions? Why did that happen? Is it maybe because it's related to poverty? Is it related to age? Is it related to anything? So no data on this basically means no data-based public policy in this context. And what we did following this, so this was happening May, June, let's say. What we did is that we initiated a strategic litigation campaign in June. And we contested the refusal of every county police in the country. So we requested this information from every county police. So not the national police, because the national police said that they do not have this data. County police maybe does have it. So we received 42 refusals, let's say, to offer us this information. We went to justice, to court with against all of them since June of last year. Arguing that FOIA does imply the obligation to also process information and not only give you information that they already collect, because that's basically the argument that the police is putting forward. We are still doing this right now. We have 42 ongoing cases with the same objects, and we're trying to see, first of all, how courts also understand the FOIA and how they apply it, and what's the jurisprudence on this subject. And right now, first instance has been closed, so meaning that at tribunal level, we've already had all the cases dealt with. We have 21 for us, 20 for the police. And we have one left pending, which hasn't, because of COVID. It's also been very interesting to see how courts actually, how they've handled their cases during this period. And we are right now in appeal, and we're waiting for this phase to end as well. Why did we do this? Is because, as I said, it's a way for us to actually 20 years since we've had this law, it's still important. It's important for us to not look at it as in 2001. If we're still debating whether or not an institution has to process information to give you to answer your request, we're still in a very old scenario where we're debating whether there is this obligation or not. Because right now, most European countries, or let's say the broader debate is open data. How institutions should put information at disposal of citizens and their citizen CSOs and whatever on most relevant topics. And right now, as you can see, we're still debating in a very important issue, right? Sanctions imposed during a lockdown on rights and liberties of individuals. Information on this information, we still don't have it, and we don't consider, our public institutions consider that this is not really relevant. So what we're trying to do is basically to initiate a discussion with public authorities as well, in the context of this litigation, as well as because we're gathering data as this goes forward, to put forward a discussion about where we need to be with when it comes to public to access to public information and to open data. So this is what we've been doing on freedom of information. Now, as I told you, we've been also working a lot on anti-money laundering legislation and GDPR. In the past 2 years, my organization has been actively involved in trying to support civil society organizations in Romania to comply with, let's say, technical issues. Civil society sector is still developing here. Big cities, let's say, have a big number of, or a bigger number of civil society organizations, but there's still a lot of small to medium organizations throughout the country, especially in rural areas or smaller urban areas. They're usually organizations who do a lot of important work, but there are few people who work there, and mostly voluntarily. And we've had legislation that has to deal with civil society organization being adopted in the last couple of years, which can become very burdensome for a lot of them. And one of them has been anti-money laundering legislation, which mainly transposed the EU directive into national legislation in 2019. But the problem is that it included this obligation for CSOs to declare beneficial owner. But it included it in a very strange way, let's say, because first of all, it was very unclear what for CSOs, what a beneficial owner it meant, in the sense that our definition at national level translated it into members of the board, also maybe founding members, also maybe all members. So it was a very unclear definition of what exactly NGOs had to do. It was a burdensome procedure in the sense that you had to go to a notary public to have a declaration authenticated, to deposit it with Ministry of Justice a couple of times a year almost. The problem was that it could end up in the initial phase of how the legislation looked, it could end up into being ultimately a sanction of dismantling, disbanding the organization if you actually didn't do it. We were part of an effort also to advocate for this obligation to be eliminated from the law throughout 2019 and 2020, when the deadline for depositing this, to putting forward this declaration came up, meaning this summer. And we participated in different discussions with the Ministry of Justice, who was responsible of this, who basically had to receive the declarations, and with MPs to try to see how this process can be made simpler. In 2020, the Parliament passed an amendment that would partially eliminate this obligation. So you could say it was a success in the sense that it eliminated for some organizations that were only made up of natural persons, so no legal persons, or who were not, let's say they had no legal persons either in their boards or in their founding members or anything else. These organizations no longer have to make this declaration. Unfortunately, there are still some organizations who still have to, and the definition and the procedure is still quite unclear. Also on GDPR, we, as you know, the GDPR entered into force in May 2018, and it imposes all sorts of obligations when it comes to processing of personal data. And this also created a kind of a problem for, at least for the CSO sector in Romania, because it's a vulnerability, as I said. We are talking a lot about small organizations who usually deal with sensitive areas, like working on social services, and who deal with kids or vulnerable people, and who process data, but who have no resources or expertise to actually handle or to know how to comply with such standards, meaning technically, legally, and so forth and so on. My organization initiated a project in 2019 where we're trying to help NGOs throughout the country comply with these standards. And we've done this in let's say in two ways. First of all, the problem is that authorities here still public institutions still do not understand the CSO sector. They mostly treat us as if we are profit. A lot of the times they assimilate us a lot, which is not true. And the expectations are kind of similar, as if we were a profit, a company who has resources and so forth and so on. And thus we engaged in dialogue with the Data Protection Authority to help them understand our sector a little bit better and the expectations on this sector, and also to have them on board with us throughout a series of workshops to discuss data protection and how exactly CSOs can become compliant with the standards. And we did this throughout 2019 across the country. We went in bigger cities and had NGOs from around the neighboring areas come and join the discussion. And right now we're on the verge of finalizing instruments which are tailored to the needs of NGOs on this subject. I would close right now just mentioning that my organization is also involved in elections, meaning that we've been monitoring elections in Romania and neighboring countries since 2012. We monitor, we accreditate internal observers, but we also monitor election day, we monitor electoral campaigns, and most recently in the last couple of years, we monitor political financing. This is where we are actually linked with the second speaker from Romania, with Code for Romania, because we work together to have this mobile application developed, which they developed for observers during election day here. And I would close my presentation. Thank you. I think I went a little bit over the time, but I hope it was useful information. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cezara. By the way, like, I'm really impressed, and I love the structure of your speech. Like, it was really, I could really easily stick to it and follow it. And now it's, as Cezara said, time for your questions. You can either ask them on chat, or you can also take the floor, and maybe you can also maybe share your experience. Could be different than Cezara's, or so it's time for you to ask questions directly after Cezara's presentation. I'm watching the chat, and of course I try to see all of you in this. I saw that Krzysztof unmuted. Krzysztof, do you want to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't aware I'm unmuted, but it's quite impressive.
Okay. So you didn't want to ask the question?
No. It's rather a comment that
okay.
Problems are quite standard for the countries in our region, and yeah, so we could relate in many things, although at a much lower scale so far. So we are one of these organizations that are in the countryside, just learning these competences that you have. But impressive and really nice to hear the story. So.
Yeah, exactly. I had the same impression. Thank you, Krzysztof. That's why it's in this meeting we invited not only experts from Norway, so as usual from donor states, but also from beneficiary states, because we feel that we have many challenges in common, also political challenges. Thank you, Krzysztof. And now I see that Ingeborga wrote a question. First one, do you have any activities on raising awareness on the values like open data or democracy or transparency in the society?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Yes, we actually do. We have a comprehensive, so besides what we do, let's say in the more technical areas that I also explained, my organization also has a good component of encouraging active citizenship. So we have a program which is called School for Democracy, where we work with teachers from high schools and also with their students in a lot of activities that have to do with understanding their rights as citizens, values such as you explained, transparency, open data, open administration, democracy, so forth and so on. We've been doing this since 2015, and right now, for example, we're in the process of, during the pandemic, we were very happy to be able to develop a program that we could do online. It's a platform that is called Let's Talk About Youth, and it's basically a competition for young students in high school to learn how to talk about the issues that are important for them and their community in very short speeches that are based on solutions. For example, transport, violence, bullying, labor, you can name anything, any of them. And we're basically working a lot with that area as well, trying to go more grassroots and help citizens understand how they can actually make their rights, how they can actually exercise these rights and put them in practice. I hope I answered your question.
Wonderful. I just thought that you have this extra, but yeah, I hope I was okay. Okay, well, it's time for you for other yeah. Ingeborg wrote thank you on chat. Any other questions, comments to Cezara? Cezara will stay with us, correct me if I'm wrong. So if there will be any other question after 10 minutes, so it's also time for you. And second question from Ingeborg, after having so many open conflicts, of course, in brackets, with public institutions, how do you gain trust of other CSOs?
I wouldn't say we have open conflicts. I think this is the first one where we actually went to court against the police on this topic. And to be honest, I don't think it's considered that much of an open conflict either. I think it's an issue where we're debating what exactly is the standard when it comes to public information. But we are also part of coalitions with other NGOs, and we actively work with them because I think everybody has more or less this kind of relationship, you would say love-hate, right? Where you're not necessarily on the same page with some public institutions and representatives, but I think it's part of our job as well to make them understand a little better what we do and our sector. At least that's been our experience. It's not that we always agree, but we need to find a way to have them on our side and understand and be our partners in this. And I think we try very hard to do that. And I think there's other NGOs here in Romania that do the same.
Thank you very much. And now I think it's time to move to Norway to see the different perspective on advocacy, and also the experience from different country. This time considered to be more democratic and that's what Polish, for example, civil societies many times say, that, oh, it's so easy to provide advocacy in countries such as Norway. So now let's see if Guri will agree with this, let's say, cliche, and how is it to provide advocacy activities in Norway. So now we are moving to Norway, and I would like to give the floor screen to Guri from the Association of NGOs from Norway.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if I can answer that question. It's I think any democracy has its own issues in a way, and but I'll try to talk about how we work on advocacy, and also a bit about what advocacy really is. Because I think that's also something we often talk about these terms, but we don't always sort of think about what they actually comply. So my name is Guri Idsø Viken. I'm a senior political advisor at the Association of NGOs in Norway, which is called Frivillighet Norge, which means like voluntary Norway. And we represent 300 central NGOs in Norway, so most of the main NGOs in Norway, really. Everything from Red Cross to the National Sports Association to the National Scouting Association to different kind of aid organizations, National Cancer Society, various group of NGOs. And they have local chapters as well. So we represent over 50,000 local chapters all in all. And we are consensus based. So that means that all of our political opinions are, everyone agrees on them. And we never have an opinion that not all of our members agree on. So it's not majority based, but it's everyone. Everyone agrees, which gives us strength, but also makes it hard sometimes to agree. So so just to talk a little bit about what advocacy really is. I think it's really easy to say that advocacy. Do you see my cursor? Yeah. So it's easy to say that advocacy is, these things, the protests in Poland and Belarus, or this, which is my boss, Stian, who is talking to the Minister of Culture, Obywatelskiego in Norway. And that's like the very, either you talk to politicians or you protest something and try to change something. That's of course a big part of it. But it's also a lot of the other activities that organizations do. These are just a few examples of graffiti or writings on the wall. One is from a wall I saw outside the parliament in Lisbon, Portugal, where it says something like, the government bought themselves a submarine because our country is sinking. Which is a quite strong political opinion, and I'm sure it says something about frustration in the population, and that's also advocacy, just saying what you mean on the wall. And this is a wall in Oslo that I used to pass every day on my work, and it used to say boycott Israel, And one day someone just put a line across Israel. So there was really a dialogue on the wall. And that's also, sometimes you just need to go back to the basics. This is what people have always done since the Stone Age. We wrote messages on the wall, and that's and now we write them in our virtual walls in Facebook, for instance. And that's also advocacy. That's also a way of getting your opinions across. And another one is the agency that you get by having activities, either in minority groups like this one, for the activities for the elderly like this one. You show your value, and that makes it also easier to talk their rights later, because you show how much you mean. And I went to the Wikipedia article about advocacy, and I thought the first line there was really good, actually, which says that advocacy is an activity by an individual or a group that aims to influence decisions within political, economic, and social institutions. And I'm just thinking that sums up pretty much everything that CSOs do. So, and I think that's important to remember. And I really wanted to include one picture from the Polish women's protests, because I have to say that the last couple of years, what's inspired me the most is what's been happening in Poland. I'm really impressed by the protests that have been going on in Poland, and I'm sure it might feel useless sometimes, because you don't get as much across as you would hope to, but I'm sure you make a really big change for in the long run, and not just for women's rights, but also for the right to protest and say your words even when it seems hopeless. And I think it's really inspiring how you've been working in Poland. So yes, the democracy in Norway might seem open, but the power in Poland is impressive, and I just want you to know that. It's really this is even in my Facebook heading. this image, I love it. So why would you do advocacy? The main reason is that you, as a CSO, you represent interests of a group. And the reason why you do advocacy work is to make sure that the interests of your groups are heard and considered. And you also want the political decisions to be done on a well-informed basis, that actually when politicians make decisions, they are well-informed. They know what they might do the wrong decisions, but they still need to be informed of why it's wrong. So the well-informed politicians are important, no matter if they do the right or the wrong decisions. And you have certain goals that you want to achieve. Either you represent a group that needs something, or you have a goal of changing a system or something. You have a goal and you want to achieve something. So that's also, of course, why you do advocacy. And also, you want to contribute to a well-functioning democracy, because the democracy, it looks a bit like this. And I'm really sorry about this. It's a complicated model, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But I just want to show you that this is the whole democracy. This is a political system, which is, of course, the parliament and the government and the political parties that are a bit inside and outside of the system. But the political system, it gets fuel from somewhere. It works for someone. It works because of something. And that's because the environment, like the demography, the economy, the globalization, the migration, sustainability, things like that, it makes demands on society that it needs something from the society, and it needs something from the political system. And then you have the elections and the public votes that give support to the system. And both the demands and the support is important for the system to work. And the CSOs and the media, and also to some extent the private businesses, they contribute to both of these. And it's really important that these make the system work. And you have a place in the system. And I hate talking about systems, but it's actually really important to remember that. And you do have an agency. You have your agency in the members and the interests that you represent, in the civil rights that you have, either the UN civil rights or the human rights or the European rights. You have rights, and also smaller rights, of course. And you have a valuable knowledge of your groups, of certain areas, of certain topics. You serve critical functions. You offer services, and you play a role in the democracy. And all of this makes your agency. It should make you confident that you have something to say and something to do. And you should always remember your agency. Because your agency, it makes it possible for you to do various kinds of lobbying activities. These pictures are from Frivillighet Norge's activities in a political festival in Norway that's called Arendalsuka. It's where all the different kind of organizations and political parties and political leaders and business leaders, they all come to Arendal, which is the city I live in actually. And they all come here for a week, and we have different kinds of events and meetings and talks and so on about the various kinds of topics. And Frivillighet Norge, we do a lot there. But one of the things they do is actually go for walks with the politicians. So instead of asking them for a meeting, we take them for walks in the beautiful city. We show them the beautiful city, and they're happy to get away from the noise, and we can just talk to them about what matters to us. So my boss, he gets really fit during this week because he walks and walks and walks with all the politicians, and it's a good way of getting them on your own for a couple of minutes. And it also gives a lot of good media opportunities, of course. We also have a sailing boat because this is by the sea, and you're only allowed to have a small stand that there are really rules for that, how they are supposed to look like. But and we do have that as well, but there's a lot of those. But we also we get the boat from the Sea Scouts. So these are the Sea Scouts, and we live in this boat. And no one told us we are not allowed to have this sail on the boat that is telling political messages. And it's really visible because everyone passes this boat. So that's also a way of just putting your message across when everyone's going to the pub for a drink. That's something we do. And of course, lobbying activities, they are both formal and informal. An important part of what we do is give input to party and government platforms. Political parties have different political platforms that they rule from and that they are elected on, and we give input to that. We say, this is what you should write about the NGO sector. This is what the NGO sector wants. And the same with the government. When the government is elected, they gather and they make a platform on which to rule. And we give input to that platform. Actually, last time we stood outside where they had their meetings for a couple of days. We stood outside there all the time with different NGOs, and we gave them input every time they went outside to have a cigarette, or every time they arrived in the morning or something, we were there. We give input to national budgets every year, and we give our comments to the national budget when it's presented. We give input to various kinds of white papers and official reports, both before they are written, during the procedure and when they are presented. And we take part in hearings, which are, of course, about that sometimes as well. We write letters and we have meetings in specific cases with political representatives. And we also have cooperation and dialogue with certain parties. For instance, we could write questions that the parliamentary representatives give to the parliament. So instead of just waiting for them to ask something, we say, you should ask about this. And then we write the question for them. And that works in Norway, actually. We offer our knowledge. We have a lot of knowledge on the NGO sector, and we offer that. We do watchdog activities in different ways. And we take part in public demonstrations and protests. And we do some media commentaries and stuff. And yeah, so there's a lot of things that you could do as a lobbying activity, and we do very much of those. These are a few examples, but I'm thinking I don't have so much time. Or
still, and how much do you need? Because you still have a few minutes.
Okay. Okay, so these are a few of the examples of what we did. This is when we stood outside the government negotiations. This is our former Minister of Culture. And we stood there and they came out and took pictures with us, and we told them about what's important for us. This is a demonstration that we had where we brought a lot of the different organizations, and we stood outside and we were all in the same issue. And we invited the opposition to join us. So this is it's about VAT for NGOs. So it's a really boring but important issue, of course. And also this is a Norway Cup, which is the largest football cup in the world, I think, for youth and for children and youth. And we also go there and talk to the politicians because they come there as well to show themselves. And we stand there and we take pictures with them. And so this is also our former Minister of Culture. And we do a lot of media work. I don't think I should get into it too much, but we try to criticize in the media and also be a little bit positive sometimes. Because some of my tips is to remember your purpose, that your agency, like I said, it comes from your mandate. It doesn't come from you as a personal being, it comes from who you represent and the mandate you have. And you should stick to that and not just talk about anything else because you love your power or you're happy to have a meeting. You should stick to your mandate. You should be confident that you have a value and that you have an agency. You should respect that politics is hard prioritizing. It's hard to be a politician because everyone tells you what they need and you need to prioritize. And you should respect that. But you should also know that it's okay to only pledge your case. It's not your job to pledge someone else's case. They can do that. You should have a coherent plan and strategy with multiple actions to reach your goal, not just say one thing one day and another thing the other day, but to make sure that everything fits together, because it will ruin your case if it doesn't. You should find your supporters and cooperate with them, do joint efforts. You should also be open about your position, and I think that's a point to stress. Because I think sometimes people think that they need to be secretive about what they feel, or they should. It's like they shouldn't tell anyone, and that's one thing. And another thing is that, of course, it can be controversial sometimes, but it's okay because you have decided what you think about something, and it's often you have decided together with a lot of people. And you should just be open about that. It's okay to have a position. That's why you're there. And I also think it's important to give positive feedback and helpful advice to politicians. Political work is not just about criticism. It's also about finding good solutions together. And it's about telling them when you're happy, not just when you're unhappy. So that's because the politicians really need some wins sometimes. They need to say that, look, they asked us for this and we gave it to them and now they're happy. That's also a way of getting things done. Yeah. I just wanted to end with saying that advocacy is a bit different at these very challenging times. You should respect during the COVID-19 situation that the priorities shift a little. We need to think about the political and individual priorities for people, and but we also need to protect our rights. COVID-19 shouldn't be an excuse for taking away rights. COVID-19 should not be an excuse for taking away your funding. You still have your basic human rights. And but then one thing to do is also find your role in common solutions. We have a crisis together and we solve it together. And the NGOs are really often have good ways of contributing there. So find those opportunities, but be aware that you shouldn't be too happy about them without acknowledging that people have lost their loved ones because of it. And you should also remember that there is a time after the crisis and think about what's needed then, because there have been a lot of big changes now, and there will be a lot of big changes due to the COVID-19. And you should remember that you need to play a role in the rebuilding of society afterwards. So yeah, I think I stopped there.
Thank you very much, Guri, and also for not only for sharing your experience, but also for going to the basics of and basic values of advocacy, and also basics when it comes to the whole idea of being active in the civic space. I see that we have 3 questions to you written on chat. So first question from Ingeborga. She asked, what barriers, challenges do you have with advocacy in Norway? What is difficult in, for example, contacts with politicians, and how do you deal with it? And then Jan Basil from Grupa Zagranica wrote, how do you evaluate your advocacy? How do you know if your advocacy efforts have been successful? Any specific tools to measure success, failure? Sorry for wrongly reading it aloud. And the second one from Jan Basil, do you have any examples of unsuccessful advocacy I understand delivered by your organization? If so, what failed? Oh.
Well, they're big questions,
yeah.
But I'll try to. I think one of the problems in Norway is that the NGO sector is really big and it plays a really important role, but people are not always so aware of it. It's like it's in our blood, and it's the NGOs are responsible for so much without really getting credit for it. And I think that one of our problems sometimes is to show how important the NGO sector really is, and to especially to the media. I think it's often problematic. I work in the media myself. I'm also a writer. And I experience often that my news editors are more interested in my private opinion than in the NGO opinion. And that's really frustrating. And I think it's about understanding how large the sector is and the value they create. So that's really a challenge that we always work on. And one of the issues for Frivillighet Norge is that we are consensus-based, and we really need to be. So we try to stick to that, but it's and it gives us agency. But whenever some of our members go out and say something else, that takes away the agency. It splits us, and it makes it hard to get your point across. So that's also always something we are working on. That we shouldn't say one thing and then someone else come and say something else, because that really splits us, and it kills our mandate. So that's that. There have been issues of that, especially with some of the large NGOs that also represent a lot of people themselves, like the sports organization, for instance, which is really large. And they don't mean bad, but they just have a lot of members themselves that they need to talk for, and they forget that we need to be coordinated. So that's another thing. And I think also an issue is that people think that we are only helping vulnerable people, that we are not strong representatives of strong ideas and opinions, and that we are democratically organized. So I think also that's like, we're not just here to help. And another thing is the government, especially the local governments, they are shutting down activities that they used to be governmentally funded, and they tell the NGOs to do it instead, which is not, of course, the way the NGOs work. The NGOs, they find their own issues and they solve these because they want to solve these. They don't do activities for free for the government. So that's also another thing. And also, I think what I didn't speak about is the freedom to make your own choices, which is also affected by the funding. So when the funding is more project-based and the government defines the projects, then you lose your way of seeing what the issues in society is, because you always have to adjust your activities to whatever gets funding. So that's also an issue. And yeah, were there any other things? Tools to measure. We do have we have like a survey every year that measures the activities in the NGOs sector, and it's pretty huge, and it gives us a good number. So that's one, at least.
And the failure as far as unsuccessful advocacy, or?
Yeah, that's when we're not coordinated. I think that's there have been issues where we have said things publicly that our members don't agree with, and they say something else. That would be a failure for us.
Okay, I see. So it can be also like let's say lessons learned for other, like to divide the role. Yeah, thank you for that. And I see so many common challenges we are all struggle, especially with the the vision that politicians have on the third sector and on us, like representatives of civic sector, that, for example, we don't have like data with us, but we actually have. And I see, and Krzysztof recommended, like they are, there is a question from Krzysztof. If you look for a partner in Norway who has and would like to share their knowledge and experience in the area of advocacy monitoring on a local, regional level, so this municipality level, as far as I understand, which has some specific characteristic like stronger dependency on local authorities, personal connections, etc., where would you advise us to go? So this is like a direct question to you on advising a partner. Okay.
I guess many organizations work on this, so I guess it depends a little on what kind of organization you are, because it's good to find an NGO that works on some of the same fields as you. If you work, I don't know, yeah. So it's hard to. There are a lot of members in Frivillighet Norge, and it's hard to choose one of those. But I can give you the list of the NGOs in Norway, and you can look at them.
And yeah, thank you very much. I see that Eva has a question. So time for you. Yeah. So last question to Guri. Go ahead, Eva.
Okay. Sorry for my English. I don't use it very often. Guri question. Guri question to you. How is it in Norway? Because in Poland, most of national sport associations are really close connected to the politicians, and they actually cannot live without the money from the government. And how is it possible to do advocacy where this connection is so very close, and it's also in the local government almost the same with sports clubs. My passion is sports, so that's why it's this question too.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it regards more than sports clubs. I think your financial independence is really important. And in Norway, it's actually quite low, the level of governmental funding. It's about 27% or something. So it's lower than in the EU as a general. And also when it comes to sports, actually, it's a bit higher for sports. But it's really important because if you get all your funding from the government, it's hard to be critical of the government. I see that. It's in Norway, it's not so hard. Like the government has this really strong, or the Norwegian society is built on this really strong belief that the independence of the NGO sector is important to the democracy. So I think it's not so hard in Norway, but we still talk about it. Like if you get all your funding from the government, remember that it could be harder to be critical. And I know that there's been issues in the United Kingdom, for instance, where actually the government says that you're not allowed to be critical of the government if you get funding. And that's especially in the health sector. And that's a place where you really should be critical of the government. So I know there are issues many places on that. And I think the best way is to make sure you have other ways of income. And one of the main sources of income in Norway is the membership fees. And the training, the fees for training. So if you, for instance, train in a football club, then you pay a membership fee and a training fee. And that, of course, is also an issue because it makes it expensive to do sports, and it could create differences between low-income groups and other groups. And so in the football, I used to be in the board of the largest football club in Norway called Vålerenga. And we had funding especially for low-income groups so that they didn't have to pay the training fees, for instance. But that, yeah, that was also governmental money. So I don't know. It's a hard question. I don't have an easy, but I hope it was a little bit.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think that the common, the big challenge is how to change this stereotype or cliche that when you have money from one institution, you have to be very polite to this institution and you can't say anything critical. I think that's also the cultural habits that we have to fight, because like you can have your own opinion even though you are supported. So this is also one. But thank you for this question, extremely important, Eva, in the world of sport, not only sport, actually, civil society organizations in Poland, but in all.
And I just to add, it's one of the biggest issues, I think, for the whole NGO sector in the whole world right now, and for many people, it's. I just read about this story in Spain, where today where a rapper is in court because he had lyrics that were critical of the royal family. And that's like he's sentenced, I think. And so there's a lot of issues like that right now, and it's horrible, I think. So we really need to be aware of it.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much, Guri. And now we are moving back to Romania. So, and I'm very happy to introduce to you our first expert, Olivia Vereha from Code from Romania. So now we will also have slightly different experience and approach presented, and I'm very happy to give the floor screen to Olivia.
Hi everyone, thank you so much, Anna, for inviting me, and I'm really glad to be here. I've learned a lot of very, very useful things here. I do admit that probably our organization is the odd one out in this call, because we're actually working at a very horizontal level. We're working both with public institutions and civil society in Romania. And our goal is to actually provide digital tools in order to help advocacy efforts and increase transparency as much as possible. So if there is one area in which we are really, really focused on, is how to bring data closer to people and bring data to those organizations, be they in social services or human rights or any other kind of field, help them actually work better and achieve their goals. I'm going to share my screen. I hope it works. Please let me know if you see.
It works perfect. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I thought about what to bring in this conversation, what would be really useful to you. And I went back into our project list and our tech research files, and I tried to put together a few examples of digital tools that we either have or we're going to take out pretty soon, that will be available not just in Romania, but they're going to be open source, so available for any other country that might need to use this specific type of tool. Just a very few words about what we do and how we work, because I would like to take these 2 minutes to present, just because maybe there are some points in our general other programs that you might find useful and you would like to contact us, and maybe we can provide help in any other areas. So we have 6 main programs. We have Civic Labs, where we do research. We actually do research going out the field, interviews, focus groups, and so on, in order to identify what are the pain points in a specific sector and understand how we can intervene with technology in order to fix them or to support the civil sector in that area to fix those issues. We have a volunteering community of 2,000 people. That is the Tech for Social Good program, where we have developers, mostly developers, but also other specialized individuals in the IT area. And that is where we actually develop solutions. We have the Civic Tech 911, which is a program we really scaled up during the pandemic. It's basically an on-demand tech service for NGOs that is completely free. So if you need anything, starting from install my Windows up to I need a solution for data analysis, you can come to us. We're going to book a session with the right specialist, and we're going to you. And this has been like the most active program we've had during the pandemic, because a lot of NGOs were forced to move in the online area and they needed support to do so. We have a critical tech infrastructure area where we do maintenance for some of the solutions we're building. Normally, everything that we're creating is often given to an NGO or to several NGOs to use them and administer them long term. like in healthcare or social services or domestic violence and so on and so forth. But there are some tools, and one of them was mentioned by Cezara earlier, like election monitoring tool, that we keep them and we maintain them ourselves. Usually, since funding was quite a topic in this area, usually we try to administer in our organization those tools that are definitely impossible to fund. It's very hard to find a donor who's going to support an election monitoring app. It's very hard to find a donor that's going to support a database manager or other tools that are like data portals and stuff like that, which are not really exciting and wonderful to put and to brag in your marketing department. Let's be honest, you do have to take that into account when you're trying to push for your projects. We also have the Update Romania, which is our personal area of advocacy, where we're trying to push public policy in digital transformation. And this is where we work with public institutions and other organizations to try to push for standards in development, for accessibility, for building inclusive technology, and making sure that if the state and offers the public specific digital tools, they are built and they're valuable for their users. So we do have an active role, we do play an active role here. And we're trying to do exactly all of the things that were mentioned earlier. We're trying to contact the politicians and talk to public institutions and write papers and discuss about it in the media and so on and so forth. And we do offer also support for public institutions, but with we offer it pro bono. Our status always says that we're never going to touch any kind of public money. And we've made this decision because we're trying to remain in the neutral area and to be that actor that can possibly mediate between the private sector and the public institutions, and also between civil society and public institutions in terms of digital transformation. So we are and we're going to stay a very horizontal organization and support in all areas where needed. We also have a Code for Romania task force. This is a specific program that we've deployed for the first time in the pandemic, because it was the first time it was needed. We have a specific way of working, procedures, methods, and so on and so forth, where we offer emergency support and development, which means we have a nucleus of a couple of hundred developers that are going to just stop whatever they're doing and develop solutions that are needed in an urgent manner. So we developed a lot of platforms in partnership with the public institutions to increase information reaching the public during the pandemic. And now this is probably the slide I'm going to stay on the most. We do develop a lot of tools that are coming in support of people to get better data, to collect more information, to collect it properly, to clean it, and also tools that encourage and foster collaboration in various sectors. We also try to, all the tools that we push and we offer pro bono to the Romanian state at this moment in time are also tools that, or any kind of local authority at the end of the day, so it's not just central institutions. What we do is that we build them and we push for them to be adopted and used exactly as we've designed them, especially because we're always trying to impose a few standards of transparency in these tools. So I'm going to give an example. If we offered, we've built two pieces of infrastructure, actually, of digital infrastructure for the Department for Emergency Situations. And we've told them, you can use them. These are the tools, they're yours, do your job with them. So I'm helping you do your job. But in exchange, you need to take out how many NGOs you work with. You need to take out all the data that you collect or process as a consequence of using these tools. So in any kind of collaboration we have, we keep on pushing for opening as much information as possible to the general audience and to the NGOs so they can use it in their advocacy efforts or any other kind of activities. I'm going to give a few examples and I'm going to mention some of the tools are tools that are destined to be used by general audiences, and some of them are tools that are directly designed for internal use by NGOs, regardless of the sector. And some of them are you're going to see they're quite specific for NGOs who need to do a lot of pushing and advocacy. So we've built a data port, and all of these tools are redeployable and scalable to any other country. So if you feel like you need any of them, just give us a sign and we can talk about it. So data portal is, we do have a national data portal. It is very poorly used. The data is not clean. Usually institutions, though they have a legal obligations to open their data, they forget about it. It's not necessarily, it's an ongoing process. They've done some progress in this area, but honestly, the problem is that local authorities do not send data to the central authority so they can actually report on this kind of information. What we did was like, okay, we're going to go to the local authorities and we're going to give them a tool to support them in opening data to their communities. So we figured what's in it for them, and they want to be transparent because they want to regain the trust of their communities. And like, I'm giving you a local data portal, but at the same time, you're going to allow me to do an automation between the local data portal and the national one so that the state collects all this data automatically and does not depend on you as a local authority anymore. And this is what we've built it once for one local authority, and now we're replicating it very easily in all other local, not all other cities. We've developed also a tool that's called Vot ONG, which is an elections platform for NGOs. We've realized that a lot of the times we do need to send representatives of civil society in various bodies. But up to this point, we did not have a platform that would allow us to come together as organizations and actually choose and vote for who we want to send, I don't know, in the Economic and Social Council or in the monitoring the UN Convention and other things like that. So we've developed a place where all NGOs can register, they can propose candidates and they can vote, and we can use this platform for any kind of elections we might need to organize in civil society. And also we've made it available in such manner that even if you're, I don't know, a small city and you need to designate a representative to a local council, you can also use the platform for that. We did think a lot about funding, and even starting 2018, we've actually built a tool that would allow any NGO, regardless of how digital they are, to build a page where they can collect tax, that tax deduction of 3.5% that people can redirect. This is, it's grown immensely, and it's growing a lot this year because NGOs do not have the means to collect these forms anymore in person. So this is a tool that we've built in order to help them get funding, and that's not dependent on any kind of funder or they're not conditioned on a specific project. We're working, we've designed two tools for the public institutions. One that allows them to write legislation properly and pass this legislation through the normal flows. And in order to make it more publishable. We live in a country of PDFs. We live in a country where processing information after you've obtained it very difficultly. We're trying to give them a tool that would make their work easier, but this will also help us out in publishing legislation and making it more open for everyone. And again, it's something that we've built also for local authorities, because in the local area, the local legislation is really, really not transparent at this moment in time. We've also paired it with a public consultation tool, but a public consultation that doesn't only rely on online, because every time you have a platform for online consultation, everybody's sending in comments and so on and so forth. What we did is that we managed to integrate also the offline component of public consultation in it. We have an expert consultation platform that will allow specific groups, let's say like all the NGOs in the civil sector, they need to work on several pieces of legislation together. They need to comment on it. They need to prepare a draft. They need to work on their documents so they can push them back to the ministry and so on and so forth. So it's a collaborative tool. We have designed, and we're currently in talks with the government to build a national access to information platform. We've figured out what's in it for them. They need to report, and they have several indicators they need to respect, but they have a problem because they don't understand what's the performance of all institutions in the access to information area. So I said, okay, we can give you this tool, you can monitor everything that's happening, but this means that we will digitize for every public institution the process of handing out information. We're also working on a data scientist hub, because this is it's a specialized group of people that don't necessarily work together, and they are a very important resource for NGOs who need to work with and process data in order to inform or fundament their proposals, like in public policies and so on. So we're trying to bring together volunteer data scientists to work inside a platform and exchange ideas and get tasks from NGOs and solve them in the platform to help them actually support their claims better. We're also developing right now, and it's going to be ready in, I think, in 2 months, 2 more tools. One of them is the participatory budgeting tool for local authorities. And another one is a proposals bureau. That's the translation, which is actually a redeployment of a quite famous platform, which is Consul, that has been redeployed in over 35 countries up to this moment. And we're trying to also, we've actually broken down Consul in modules to get authorities to adopt it way easier, because they're going to say, we don't need this, we already have a website, we don't. So what we're pushing for is, yeah, but you don't have this tiny thing that we've just built, just take this module, and then we're going to sell them another module. And, well, sell them is, that's it, we're just going to push, but I also have these tools. So in this increased adoption of tools really help us a lot. We have, I think, one of the biggest tools we've worked on, and we're going to launch it in the next 2 weeks. It's Paul. His name is Paul. It's an NGO assistant that will allow you to work with giant databases. So you can bring in a lot of tables. It's highly customizable, and really important, it's really friendly to NGOs who are not necessarily digitally mature. So we're giving out a tool that will let you work with data in a very, very friendly manner and also process it a lot. We're building a tool that will allow you, will allow you to get in contact with your representatives. We've noticed that there's very little communication, especially between people and representatives on a local level. So we're trying to get people to easily find who they can talk to and who they can actually address when they need to push for changes. And we're working on something that is quite a big project, but we're happy that it's happening right now. We've realized that the most important part in opening up information for citizens and NGOs is actually to get in Romania. It's a very specific to Romania, this one. All the websites we have for public institutions, 98% of the websites we have are really, really poor quality websites. And a lot of them do not respect any kind of accessibility rules, and a lot of them do not have basic transparency information that usually, I mean, they have to take it out because the law says they do, but most of them forget about it. And because they have this complete freedom in building their websites, they actually forget to post it, or they just don't want to post it. So we've designed some website builders that we're now pushing to get adopted, and it's highly likely it will happen, to get adopted by the government. And this will be the official tool through which any public institution with no cost can actually build their website. But this website builder has some inner work. So you're going to have to publish your budget, you're going to have to publish several types of reports. So you kind of have, it's similar to WordPress if you're familiar to working with WordPress, but you have some specific modules that you definitely have to fill in and publish in order to increase your transparency. We're also working on a website builder for NGOs, but this is coming from the other need that we're actually trying to support NGOs who cannot afford to build websites, to actually get them to use a tool that's going to help them just publish a website in just 1 week or 2 weeks. And we're going to also support with all the digital infrastructure needed, because also NGOs, we always claim and want transparency, and we ask for data and information from our authorities, but at the same time, we're not necessarily entirely transparent with our expenditures and our projects and our indicators. So we've built this tool to help them also easily open up their data as well, to set an example. And we've noticed something, and this is a project that we're definitely going to open internationally from the first moment. We realized that there's a lot of digital resources the NGOs do not know about. While having our Civic Tech 911 program, we've realized that in 60–70% of the cases, the solution to an NGO's problems was a digital product that already existed and that was free for NGOs. So what we're trying to do is actually not just give them tell you, okay, Slack is free for NGOs or anything else is free for NGOs, but we're also trying to tell them what it's good for. Because we've noticed that they see, oh, we have TechSoup, and TechSoup gives us a lot of free tool, but we don't know what they're good for at this moment in time. So we're trying to tell you, okay, you need communication, you can use Canva for nonprofits, you can use this one, this is how you set it up. So we're kind of building a platform inside our own website where we explain, like, this is a basic toolkit you can use as an NGO, and depending on your activities, you can move further. I'm going to stop now. I can't see any at the time, so I hope I'm not over my time. And if you have any questions or if you want to ask about any particular tool out of these, I'm really happy to answer.
Thank you, Olivia. We have a few minutes for questions, answering your questions, and I would like to really appreciate the fact that now thanks to your presentation and your speech, we could see how the advocacy and monitoring looks like in 21st century, and will look like in the future as well. So thank you for bringing up here this wind of future, and also the wind of course of today as well. And we have one question on a chat from Ingeborga. I will read it out loud in order for the future, translation and so on. So the question is, how do you deal with the fear or lack of skills to use new platforms, applications among civil society organizations and or public institutions?
Oh, this is one of the best parts about our work. We do come in contact with a lot of digital maturity levels in both in civil society and public institutions. Generally, the CSOs are not necessarily rejecting it. It's not a fear, but it's a burden to have a very hard learning curve for any other new tool. What we're doing here is that we're pushing a lot for building tools that are very explicit, and we pay a lot of attention to the user part. What we also do is that all the tools that we publish, they also come with tutorials, with support manuals, and so on and so forth. We try to we have the Civic Tech 911 program that also is designed to, if you need an assessment in your organization to understand where you are from a digital perspective and what kind of things you might need to learn. So from that perspective, we are actually trying to get them to offer them the support they need. We actually had a major success with the election platform, and currently we're setting up the first Slack for civil society, and we're going to bring them. We already started onboarding organizations and teach them how to use polls, how to create rooms, how to start talking to each other. Not just on the topic of let's elect somebody, but also on various other subjects. In public institutions, the situation is a bit different. So usually you negotiate with a ministry and they decide to adopt a solution and to open up data and so on and so forth. And what we do is that we always try to explain and to understand exactly what the pain points for the public servant that's going to use that tool. And whatever, we're always trying to embed several perks for them, which really has increased the adoption. So we're trying to see, okay, so you have a problem because every time you collect this data that I really want to get because I want to build a policy on domestic violence, let's say, but your problem is that you have a boss that requires a report every 3 days on something. Here's an automated way to build this report. While you're building this report, you're also giving me all the data I want. So there's always understanding what they need, because everybody is just furious at them. And we go and pinpoint that, okay, you're not doing your job, you're a very poor public servant, you don't want to do it. And usually people reject it because they used to fear they're going to be replaced by technology. The pandemic has taught them that there's no way back from this digital transformation. And they started to realize that if they're trapped in this digital world, might as well figure out how to make their lives easier while going digital. So for us, it was a huge opportunity to work with public institutions. And through the entire process, we always, in all our research phases, we never try to talk to the head of something. We always go to the person that serves you at a counter. We always go to the person that's going to reply to your FOIA request. We're always going to go to that person that does the work to understand exactly how we can support. Because if you don't help them grow, but you always demand something from them, they're just going to, the gap between public institutions and the CSOs is just going to grow harder and harder. And another thing in terms of a few lessons that we've taken from our experience with open source and contributing to redeployable solutions, we're trying to push a lot in explaining that, in forcing them to collaborate, actually, a long story short. The tools that we provide always have a component of working together one way or another, and empowering several key with every single tool. So if you get, I don't know, one of the person in the team in the public institution that's really excited about that tool, he's going to do your work about teaching others how to use it, understand it, and see the benefits of it. So we try to work through a lot of ambassadors when we try to push for a specific tool. But yeah, it's a huge lack of skills, but you also have to start somewhere. And we're also pushing now, for example, because we're now in public consultations on several other projects, we're pushing for a special tool to evaluate the competences inside the public service sector. Because it's not enough to have that European, the ACDL or whatever it is called, permit that you can use a computer. It's really specific in working and getting digital competences in the public sector. So we're building something that's custom to evaluate where you are as a public servant, and to be able to build like a learning curve that's convenient, comfortable, and will get you to do your job better and perform better.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your approach, and also like the approach to reach the person that will use it, not the boss. So you don't, make this power relation stronger, but you go to the, let's say, user directly. And
yeah, I'm going to give an example that just happened yesterday about the website builder I was telling you about. So we did a pilot with the website builder, and we've built one website for a public institution. And we had, since then, we had 20 or between 20 and 30 other public institutions that said we wanted to. And we said, well, we have a partnership with the Romanian government. Just go to the Romanian government, to the central institution, and tell them you need it too. So they're going to adopt it on a governmental level. So what we're doing is that, okay, you want it, I can give it to you, but I need to give it to you through a system because I don't have the resources to do the same for every institution because I'm an NGO. But if your government adopts it, you can all use it at any moment of the time. So they went and they said, Code for Romania did this, we need this, let's take it. So it also helps you to push for some specific things in the process. And in a very small, I know it seems tiny, but when we build some tools for public institutions, we also uncover some legislative issues. So we realized that in order to digitize the entire flow, somebody needs to make a very, very small change in a piece of legislation to unblock that. And we also push just, come on, let's unblock this because everybody's lives will be easier if we just manage to make this small change. And we did have quite a few experiences when we managed to change some of these things. And it's a proof that sometimes it's not just they don't want to, they just don't realize it. And you need to approach, even in these areas, you need to approach them with the benefit of the doubt. It's even in the data portal. I mean, we had a local council that was like one of the biggest in Romania and who are very digital at this moment in time. And we said, give us all the data sets you have in the local authority. And they said, we have 19. And then we were like, you definitely have more than 19 data sets in this city. And we sat down with them. We also brought people from the university and we made a small group, and we've identified that there are like 4 times more. They just didn't realize those were data sets because they were keeping them in PDFs, in Words and stuff. It's not an Excel, it's not a data set for them. And we realized it's just a matter of talking about what data means and how you can automate. It wasn't because they didn't want to, they just didn't realize that's data. And it's always giving them the benefit of the doubt Yeah, sure. If it proves they really don't want to, then you need to change your approach. But it should be everybody's innocent until proven differently.
Beautiful case story. Thank you for that. And case study and story. Thank you for that. And thank you for all presentations, for your questions. We have to finish now, but for sure you can use the experience and gain from this experience of our three speakers and their organizations and their let's say the stories they presented and lessons learned. So feel free, of course, to also contact me after the meeting. And if you have any other questions or you would like to get the contact to our speakers or the organizations they recommended. And of course, I wish you all the best with submitting applications to our advocacy and monitoring call for proposals. There is still less than 1 month because the deadline is 15th of March. But of course, remember that you can submit application together with partner from Romania, Norway, Slovenia, or any other country from the donor states or from beneficiary states, and also from the countries like Russia, Ukraine, Belarus that are neighboring Poland, but outside of the European Economic Area. So I wish you all the best and have a nice afternoon and all good luck with making the civil societies in your country stronger. And thanks to your activities, I think I'm pretty sure you will. So thank you very much and all the best.